There are certain sounds a person never expects to hear from the alley behind the Platinum Fork. It was an exclusive place, known for hushed conversations, clinking champagne glasses, and the deep rumble of expensive European cars pulling up to the curb. It wasn't known for crying. But tonight, as the cold late-night air of Toronto settled, there it was, a soft, shaky, hiccuping cry. The man who stepped out of the heavy mahogany back door was named Damon "Rhino" Vance. Damon wasn't just the owner of the Platinum Fork, he was a force of nature in the city, the kind of man whose name made other important men hang up the phone quickly. He was tall, built like a fortress, and always wore tailored suits that somehow looked both expensive and like they were meant for fighting. He stopped just outside the doorway, holding his silver phone loosely to his ear, his current conversation forgotten. Damon Vance was a black man in his late 30s. His skin was the rich, dark color of good espresso, and his head was shaved clean. His eyes, usually sharp and cold, were his most defining feature, a striking, light hazel that seemed to absorb the dim light and hold it, missing nothing. Tonight, he was wearing a charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. The look was simple, sharp, and utterly dominant. He glanced toward the dumpster area. That's where the sound was coming from. He could handle almost anything the city threw at him, police chiefs on his payroll, rivals trying to carve up his territory, or even a sudden market crash. But a crying woman? That usually meant trouble of the messy, unpredictable kind. He hung up the phone without saying goodbye. The person on the other end would understand, and walked slowly toward the sound. Crouched by the back wall, hugging her knees, was Serena. She was one of the newer waitresses at the Platinum Fork, a young woman Damon barely noticed beyond her efficient work. Serena was petite and slender, a woman in her early 20s with a mixed heritage that gave her skin a warm, golden tan. She had wide, worried brown eyes and a cascade of dark, curly hair tied back in a messy bun, strands escaping around her pale face. Her work uniform, a simple, black shift dress, was rumpled, and her shoulders were shaking violently. As Damon got closer, he noticed three things immediately. First, she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the ground, utterly lost in her fear. Second, she was rocking slightly, a sign of deep distress. And third, she was holding her right arm stiffly behind her back, pressing something against the cold brick wall as if trying to hide it forever. Damon sighed, his voice surprisingly soft but carrying the weight of command. "Serena," he said. The sound of his voice, deep, gravelly, and instantly recognizable, made her jump so hard she nearly cried out. She scrambled to her feet, her hands still clutching whatever was hidden behind her. Her eyes finally met his, and they were glistening with terrified tears. "Mr. Vance. I didn't hear you," she stammered, her voice a thin thread. Damon leaned against the wall, crossing his powerful arms over his chest. He looked calm, but his gaze was drilling holes into her. "What is the problem, Serena?" he asked. "Did one of the kitchen staff say something? Did a customer try to get too friendly?" He expected the usual, a fight with her boyfriend, a sudden bill she couldn't pay, or maybe just the stress of the late shift. Serena shook her head rapidly, clutching the item behind her even tighter. "No, sir. Nothing like that. I just got scared," she whispered. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. "I'm sorry. I'll go back inside." As she took a nervous step toward the door, something slipped slightly from her grasp. Damon's sharp eyes caught it, a slight glimpse of white paper, stained with what looked unmistakably like dark, dried blood. His easy posture vanished. His eyes narrowed to those cold, hazel slits. "Stop," he ordered. The single word was low, devoid of emotion, and more chilling than any shout. Serena froze like a deer in the headlights. "Show me what you are holding," he said. It wasn't a request. Tears welled up again, overflowing and tracing paths down her cheeks. "Please, Mr. Vance, it's nothing. It's a note, just a stupid note. A stupid note that has you shaking like a leaf out here." Damon's voice rose slightly, now edged with impatience. "Show me. Now." Serena knew better than to argue with Damon Vance. The fear of what she was holding was immediately replaced by the fear of defying him. With a trembling hand, she slowly brought the item forward. It wasn't just a note. It was a standard, letter-sized office envelope, thick and heavy. But the pristine white paper was marred. It looked like someone had dipped their thumb in fresh blood and sealed the flap with it, leaving a dark, gruesome smear across the top. Serena held it out, her fingers barely touching the paper. It was in my apron pocket, Mr. Vance, she choked out. Someone slipped it in when I was carrying plates out. I didn't feel anything. I found it in the locker room just now. It has my name on it. Damon took the envelope from her. His large fingers dwarfed the package, but he handled it with unexpected care. He checked the front. Her name, Serena Diaz, was written across the middle in a neat, professional script, utterly untouched by the blood. He turned it over to the bloody seal. He didn't need to struggle with the envelope. The paper was clearly meant to be destroyed, not opened carefully. He ripped the blooded seal open with a swift, decisive tear. Inside, there was a single piece of heavy, folded cardstock. Damon pulled it out, unfolded it, and looked down. He stood perfectly still for a long moment, the sounds of the distant city traffic muffled, the cold air suddenly feeling like a heavy blanket. Serena watched his face, searching desperately for a clue as to what he saw, but his expression was unreadable, a mask of stone. "What is it, Mr. Vance?" she finally dared to ask. Damon lowered the cardstock slowly, his hazel eyes now blazing with a dangerous, terrifying intensity. "It is an insignia," he said, his voice a low growl that held a sudden, lethal quality. "An insignia of a family that was wiped out 12 years ago. Gone. Finished." The image on the card was simple but unforgettable, a coiled serpent, its head tilted, wearing a stylized crown. Damon Vance knew that symbol. He had fought against the family who used it, the Prior Syndicate, during the bloody war that had established his own control over the city. Every single one of them was supposed to have been eradicated, their businesses destroyed, their key players either dead or locked away for life. But here it was, in a bloody envelope, handed to an innocent waitress in his own restaurant. He looked at Serena, a girl with no ties to the city's dark secrets. He saw her terror, her genuine shock, and knew she was telling the truth. She was a pawn. "Serena," he said, handing the empty envelope back to her. "You are going to take this. You are going to go straight home. You will not talk about this to anyone. Not your friends, not your family, and especially not the police. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I understand," she nodded vigorously, clutching the envelope to her chest. "Good. Go," he commanded. "Now." Serena didn't need to be told twice. She turned and ran, not even stopping to change out of her uniform. Damon stood alone in the dark alley, the heavy cardstock insignia in his hand. The city was quiet, but inside his head, a siren was blaring. This wasn't an old debt being paid. This wasn't a rivalry. This was a signal. The Prior Syndicate was extinct. If this was their mark, it meant someone was trying to either bring them back or, worse, use their long-dead name to start a new war. A war that began by terrifying a waitress in his kitchen. The game had just changed. And Damon Vance, the feared rhino, knew that the moment he decided to investigate this bloody scrap of paper, his comfortable empire was about to be shaken to its very foundation. If you are enjoying the suspense so far and can already see this movie playing in your head, do us a favor, hit that like button on this video right now. It helps us know you want to see what happens next to Damon and Serena, and it means the world to our small team. That twist dramatically raises the stakes. Serena is not just an innocent bystander, she is the target, unknowingly holding the key to the entire conspiracy. Damon's decision to investigate just became a matter of protecting his own backyard. Damon Vance did not waste time. For a man who ran a powerful, sprawling empire, his most valuable currency wasn't cash, it was information, and he had a vast network dedicated to retrieving it. He walked back into the Platinum Fork, the atmosphere of expensive dining suddenly feeling thin and fake. He bypassed the elegant dining room and headed straight for his private office, a bunker-like room hidden behind a walk-in wine cellar. He sat behind his massive, polished oak desk. He was still holding the cardstock. The coiled serpent with the crown, the Prior Syndicate insignia. Damon had spent the last 2 decades making sure that crown never appeared in his city again. He needed to confirm something quickly. He reached for the phone and made a single, encrypted call. The man who answered was named Silas. Silas was Damon's eyes and ears, a frail-looking man in his 60s who could vanish into any crowd and knew the location of every secret, forgotten body in the Greater Toronto area. Silas was white, with a shock of thinning white hair and sharp, kind blue eyes that contrasted strangely with the dark secrets he held. "Silas," Damon said, keeping his voice low. "Rhino." "It's late," Silas replied, his voice raspy. "Something just fell into my lap. Something old. The prior insignia." There was a silence on the other end of the line that lasted a full 5 seconds. In their world, that was a lifetime. "That's impossible," Silas finally said, his voice flat. "We burned that whole forest down, Damon. Every root. Every seed. 12 years ago. I know what I'm looking at. I found it in the hand of one of my waitresses, a girl named Serena Diaz," Damon explained, choosing his words carefully. "She claims someone slipped it into her pocket in the restaurant tonight. It was delivered in a bloody envelope, sealed with a thumbprint." "A bloody envelope, and the insignia," Silas repeated, processing. "Rhino, the blood is the message. It means they've found someone, and they want them silenced. This girl, Serena Diaz, she must be the target." Damon leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. "I need to know everything about her. Where she lives, where she came from, her parents, her grandparents. Everything. Look into any connection between her real or alleged family and the Priors. I want it yesterday." The Priors were Jamaican, ran their operations out of Kingston and Miami before they tried to move up here. "I'll start digging through the old ledgers and birth records. Give me 4 hours, Silas promised. Damon hung up and stared at the insignia. Why would someone deliver this symbol to an ordinary waitress? Unless she wasn't ordinary at all. 4 hours later, the office was dark save for the glow of Damon's desk lamp. Silas called back, his tone grim. "You were right, Damon. This wasn't coincidence. This girl, Serena Diaz, she is the key, and someone just unlocked the door to hell." "Give it to me straight," Damon commanded. Silas took a deep breath. "Her current name, Serena Diaz, is completely clean. But her legal documents, her birth certificate, everything she holds, it's all less than 12 years old. Someone created this identity for her, completely erasing the first 6 years of her life." Damon's mind raced. 6 years old. That was precisely the age of the children who had vanished during the Prior massacre 12 years ago. What about her true identity? It was almost impossible to find, Damon. Her caretaker did an excellent job. Her mother was Sophia Prior, the youngest daughter of Elias Prior, the head of the syndicate we took down. Sophia was a tragedy, a beautiful woman caught up in her father's business. She had a daughter, a little girl. That daughter was hidden. Silas paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. Serena Diaz is the child of Sophia Prior. She is the last surviving daughter of the syndicate we thought we wiped out entirely. Damon slowly closed his hand around the insignia, crumpling the cardstock. The waitress, the shy, scared girl he barely knew, was the heir to a fortune and a vendetta that had been lying dormant for over a decade. "Does she know who she is?" Damon asked. "Zero knowledge," Silas confirmed. "Her caretaker, a kind, strict woman named Aunt Lena, raised her in a simple, working-class neighborhood in Montreal, then moved her to Toronto. Lena never told her the truth. She raised her as Serena Diaz, a normal girl. She shielded her from everything. But the shield had just been shattered by a bloody envelope. Someone had found her. Someone knew her true identity and her hidden lineage. What about the caretaker, Aunt Lena? Dead, Damon. Died 6 months ago. A heart attack. Perfect timing, isn't it? Damon stood up and paced the length of his office. Serena was alone, unaware that the simple name Diaz was a lie, and that her entire life was built on a conspiracy to hide her. And now, the people who had killed her family wanted to finish the job. He had expected a territorial dispute, a threat to his business. Instead, he had stumbled into a desperate, personal hunt for the last member of a royal bloodline, a hunt that, if successful, could destabilize everything he had worked for. Damon pulled out his burner phone and placed a direct call. "Get me a secured location immediately," he told his security chief. "Top priority. And bring a team. I need 3 cars outside the Platinum Fork right now." He couldn't risk leaving her on her own. If she was the target of a major operation, she wouldn't last the night. And if she was killed while working for him, it would look like Damon Vance himself had finished the Pryor line. He knew the whispers would start, and then the war would begin. He had to keep her safe. He looked at the crumpled insignia again. Elias Pryor's only grandchild. The last of the Pryors. He grabbed his bespoke wool coat and headed for the door. Serena's apartment was located in a busy but worn-down area just outside the downtown core. It was the kind of neighborhood where people worked 2 jobs just to make the rent. She lived on the 3rd floor of a tired, red-brick building. She was sitting on her small, frayed sofa, staring at the bloody envelope, still utterly terrified. Her apartment was small, but tidy and cozy, filled with cheap but cheerful furniture and framed photos of her and Aunt Lena. She had done exactly what Mr. Vance told her. She came straight home, locked the door, and didn't talk to anyone. But sitting here alone, the fear was much worse. The door buzzer suddenly screamed, making her jump almost a foot off the couch. She didn't answer. Who would it be? She wasn't expecting anyone. The buzzer screamed again, long and insistent. Serena grabbed her phone. Maybe she should call the police? But Mr. Vance told her not to. Mr. Vance was scary, but he was always honest, in his own frightening way. Just as she was trying to decide, her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from an unknown number. Do not open the door. I am coming up. I am your boss. Open the door only for me. Serena's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Vance. She raced to the small window and cautiously pulled the curtain back. 3 large, black SUVs were parked haphazardly down the street, their windows tinted, looking completely out of place in this quiet, working-class street. A minute later, there was a sharp, distinct knock on her door, 2 short, hard raps. She opened the door just enough to see him. Damon Vance was standing there, radiating authority and urgency, flanked by 2 equally large men in black coats. Get your things, Damon said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. His eyes immediately swept the room, checking every corner, every shadow. You are leaving right now. You are not safe here. Serena looked at him, completely overwhelmed. Leaving? Where are we going? Mr. Vance, I don't understand. Damon walked up to her, his sheer size overwhelming the small room. He looked down at the blood-stained envelope still clutched in her hand. Someone knows who you really are, Serena. And they want you dead. Not because you're a waitress, but because of who your mother was. I know who they are, and I am not letting them touch you. He took her by the arm, his grip firm but careful. Forget the note. Forget the Pryors. Right now, your life depends on trusting me. Can you do that? Serena looked into his intense hazel eyes. He was a terrifying man, a criminal lord, but she sensed a wall of certainty and protection around him. Compared to the utter terror of the bloody envelope and the insistent buzzer, following this powerful, dangerous man felt like her only chance at survival. Yes, she whispered, tears threatening to spill again. Yes, I will. And with that single, terrified agreement, Serena Diaz, the last Pryor, stepped out of her quiet, protected life and into the epicenter of a reborn Mafia war. The drive across the city was tense, silent, and felt like it was happening at the speed of sound. Serena was tucked into the back of Damon Vance's car, a black, bulletproof vehicle that seemed to absorb all sound. She was sandwiched between 2 men whose faces were stern, shadowed by their black coats. She couldn't stop shaking. Her mind was a dizzy mess of images: the bloody envelope, the coiled snake on the card, and Mr. Vance's terrifying, blazing eyes. She had left her whole life, her apartment, her few belongings, her photographs of Aunt Lena, behind, all because of a truth she didn't know she carried. The driver, a stocky, quiet man, maneuvered the car through Toronto's empty late-night streets. Damon sat in the passenger seat, his massive frame radiating an impatient energy. He hadn't said a single word since they left her street. Finally, they pulled up to a discreet, high-rise building that didn't look like much from the outside. It was a secure location, known only to a few, a place Damon used when he needed to disappear and think. As they stepped into the sterile, quiet security lobby, 2 more men were waiting. Damon's inner circle. The first was Leon, Damon's longtime advisor and accountant. Leon was a white man in his early 50s, always perfectly dressed in a dark suit that matched Damon's style but lacked the raw, intimidating power. He was a thinker, not a fighter. He had carefully combed grey hair, a thin, sharp nose, and eyes that were constantly narrowed with suspicion. The second man was Marcus, the head of Damon's security. Marcus was a black man, younger than Damon, built like a wall, with a short, neat buzz cut and a perpetual expression of watchful calm. He was the definition of loyalty, but his suspicion of outsiders was legendary. Their eyes weren't on Damon. They were fixed on Serena. Damon placed a hand on Serena's shoulder, a gesture meant for his men, a warning, and directed her toward a secure elevator. She goes to the 3rd floor. Marcus, clear that area. She stays there until I say otherwise, Damon ordered. Marcus nodded once, silently. But Leon stepped forward, stopping Damon with a polite, but firm, hand on his arm. Damon, we need to talk. Alone. Now. Damon looked at his advisor. He knew that tone. It was the voice of a man pushing against the very limit of his loyalty. Take her up, Marcus, Damon said, his eyes never leaving Leon. As Serena was led away, Leon pulled Damon into a small, windowless security room. The moment the door closed, the fragile calm Damon had carried shattered. Are you out of your mind, Damon? Leon hissed, his voice dropping low. A prior? The last prior, brought into our most secure location? You know what that symbol means. You know the history. We spent a decade building peace on top of that rubble, and you just invited the cornerstone of the old war into the penthouse. Damon remained calm, the coiled tension in his body the only sign of his anger. I am aware of the history, Leon. That is precisely why she is here. She is a girl who waited tables, not a mafia princess. And you believe that story? Leon's voice was dripping with disbelief. A waitress with the last known prior insignia slipped into her apron, delivered in blood? Damon, this is a setup. This is a classic move. Someone planted her. She's a spy, a Trojan horse meant to learn our weak spots and bring the whole thing down. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Damon's organization was built on absolute trust. Any crack in that foundation was a direct threat. Leon's words were the Faust, deep fissure. She is a victim, Leon, Damon insisted, his voice hardening. Look at her. She's terrified. She doesn't know her real name. She doesn't know she's worth 100 million in old family debts and vendettas. If she's a spy, she's the worst one I've ever seen. Or the best, Leon countered, his eyes full of fear. They know your weakness, Damon. You don't like senseless violence, and you have a blind spot for people you think you can save. If she dies on our streets, it's a turf war. If we hold her, she's a threat. If she betrays us, we're all dead. Why not just let the people who sent the envelope finish the job? Let them fight in their own war. Damon pushed off the wall, moving close to Leon. His size alone was a threat, but the icy intent in his hazel eyes was worse. Because if she dies, the message is sent that the Pryor family is still alive and fair game. And if one of my own men touches her, the message is sent that I am the one who finished the job. Either way, the city tears itself apart. I brought her here because I control the situation now. She is leverage, Leon. She is a bomb, and I am the one holding the detonator. He leaned in closer. You work for me, Leon. You don't question my decisions. You execute them. Your job is to find out who sent that message. Do you understand? Leon held Damon's gaze for a long moment, the tension between the two powerful men unbearable. Finally, Leon sighed, the fight draining out of him, replaced by cold calculation. I understand, Damon. But I want her under constant watch. No access to phones, no contact with the outside. And if she makes one wrong move, she is out. Agreed, Damon said, ending the conversation. Upstairs, the secured apartment was luxurious but cold. Serena sat on the edge of a large, expensive bed, her heart still pounding. Marcus had posted a single, silent guard outside the door and left her alone. She didn't know what a prior was, but the way Mr. Vance and the other man, Leon, had spoken the name made it feel like a curse. She had heard the raised voices through the thick door, the words spy, liability, and finished. She didn't belong here. She was a waitress. She knew how to clear plates and mix cocktails, not how to survive in a war zone. Suddenly, the door opened and Damon walked in. He looked tired, his tailored suit a little rumpled, but his face was still a mask of pure control. Serena jumped up. "Mr. Vance, please, I don't understand. Who are the Pryors? I'm not a spy. I don't know any secrets." Damon studied her, and for the first time, his harsh gaze softened slightly. He saw the sheer, unadulterated fear of a girl whose world had just been stolen. "You are not a spy, Serena. You are a mistake," he stated, his voice direct. "A mistake someone is trying to fix. And that makes you valuable to me." He walked toward her small, sad suitcase, which Marcus had brought up. He picked up a framed photograph of a smiling, elderly woman. "Aunt Lena," Serena whispered. "She was Sophia Pryor's friend. She hid you, raised you as her own, and she died protecting your secret," Damon explained simply. "Your real family name is Pryor. They were a crime syndicate years ago. They were wiped out, and someone just discovered you are the only one left." He didn't use big words like syndicate or mafia more than once. He kept it simple. "You were born into something you don't know," Damon continued. "The people who killed your family sent that envelope. They want to kill you now because you are a threat to their peace." Serena felt the room spin. "My family, they were killed? I'm not Diaz." "No," Damon said. "You are not Diaz. But for now, that is the safest name you have." He put the photograph back down. He looked like he wanted to say something more, something reassuring, but his life wasn't built on kindness. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firming up again. "My men believe you are a weapon meant to destroy us. They will watch you. They will judge you. You make their job easy. You do not leave this floor. You do not talk to anyone about what you saw or what you know. You are under my protection now, and any challenge to you is a challenge to me. Do you understand the rules?" Serena felt a rush of exhaustion and forced courage. She looked at the giant of a man who held her fate in his hands. He might be dangerous, but he was currently the only wall between her and the bloody fate of her family. "I understand," she said, her voice stronger this time. "I will follow your rules." Damon gave a curt nod. He saw the fire in her eyes, the sudden resolve that replaced the tears. The Pryor blood was deeper than she knew. "Good," he said. "Now, rest. You need your strength. The game has begun." He turned and walked out, leaving Serena alone in the lavish room. She was surrounded by wealth, protected by the most dangerous man in the city, but she was more isolated than she had ever been, the last survivor of a long-dead war, unknowingly starting a new one. The days that followed were a blur of sterile silence and growing paranoia for Serena. The secure apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. She spent her time pacing the length of the luxurious living room, always under the silent, watchful gaze of Marcus's men, who shifted in and out of the hallway. Every meal was brought to her on a silver tray, every moment of silence amplified by the knowledge that outside, a war was brewing because of her. Damon Vance did not visit often, but when he did, his presence was a thunderstorm. He would ask sharp, direct questions about her life with Aunt Lena, trying to poke holes in her memories, desperate to find a single thread that connected Serena Diaz to the powerful Pryor legacy. She had nothing to offer but truth, a simple life, a loving guardian, and no knowledge of crime families. One afternoon, Damon returned to the secure floor, looking more stressed than usual. He was arguing intensely with Leon on his secure phone as he entered the main room, not noticing Serena was standing near the large, imposing bookcase. "I don't care how many of you disagree, Leon. She stays put. You focus on the leak, the people sending the damned messages, not on the girl," Damon growled into the phone. "And yes, I saw the books. That loss is manageable. Just hold the line." He slammed the phone shut and ran a hand over his clean-shaven head. He needed to review some sensitive files, and for some reason, he had brought them with him to this secure location. He walked over to a small, hidden desk area. He didn't want the guards or even Marcus to see what he was working on. He quickly pulled out a large, red leather-bound ledger from his briefcase. It was the kind of book you'd expect a fancy hotel to use, not a feared boss. He flipped it open and began scribbling a complex set of notes on a separate pad, referencing the columns of numbers in the ledger. The phone rang again, demanding his attention. Damon sighed heavily, placed his pen across the open ledger, and stepped away to answer the call, his focus entirely on the new, pressing matter. Serena watched him go. She didn't mean to look at the desk, but the heavy ledger was open, reflecting the light. Her eyes drifted over the columns of neat handwriting, and her brain, which had always been annoyingly good at remembering tiny details, instantly snapped a picture of the page. She saw long columns of dates, amounts in the tens of thousands, and then, off to the side, a column dedicated to short, cryptic codes. She had read the whole page in the second her eyes passed over it. One code, in particular, stood out because it was repeated 6 times right next to entries labeled restaurant supplies and wine inventory, each entry totaling exactly $50,000. The code was $77K REDOAK. It meant nothing to her. She didn't know anything about accounting or money laundering. Her mind simply filed the details away, a completely useless piece of data, right next to the smell of Damon's expensive cologne and the tiny chip in the porcelain coffee cup she'd been drinking from. A moment later, Damon returned, snapped the ledger shut with a thwack, and secured it back in his briefcase. He didn't look at her, still frowning with the worry of his business. "I need to leave for a meeting," he announced, his voice gruff. "Do not move from this floor, Serena." "I won't," she replied softly. As soon as he was gone, accompanied by the footsteps of his security detail, Serena walked back to the sofa. She felt a slight headache coming on. The constant worry was exhausting. It wasn't until 2 days later that the seemingly random memory of $77K REDOAK would explode into the most dangerous piece of information she possessed. Meanwhile, Damon's organization was quietly tearing itself apart. Leon, Damon's skeptical advisor, was not the traitor, but he was getting worried. The real traitors were 2 men deep inside Damon's trusted network, men who were using the chaos of the prior resurfacing to hide their own crimes. One of these traitors was Vincent, a middle-aged white man who managed Damon's legitimate businesses, including the Platinum Fork. Vincent, who wore thick glasses and always looked stressed, was systematically skimming millions of dollars from the cash flow, hiding it through fake invoices and dummy corporations. Vincent had a contact on Damon's security detail, a low-ranking guard named Paul. It was Paul's shift on the secure floor that Damon had visited. Paul had been standing just around the corner when Damon had that tense phone call with Leon and when Damon had casually taken out the red ledger. Later that evening, Vincent and Paul met in the shadows of a parking garage. "Rhino is getting nervous about the books," Vincent muttered, adjusting his glasses nervously. He brought the main ledger to the safe house. "His running checks." "He looked frustrated, boss," Paul confirmed, his voice shaky. "He was arguing with Leon about a leak. But he was working with the book right there, on the desk." "Did he see anything? Did anyone else?" Vincent asked, urgency tightening his voice. "No, boss. Only the girl. The prior girl. She was standing by the bookcase. She was looking at him, though." Vincent froze. Looking at him? Or looking at the ledger? Hard to say. She was standing right next to the desk when he was working. She's got those big, wide eyes. Vincent felt a cold, sharp dread snake down his spine. The ledger was the key. He had been using a specific, obscure code, $77K REDOAK, to mark the accounts that needed to be cleaned out before year-end. If Damon or Leon saw that code repeated so many times next to fraudulent expenses, they would immediately know the scope of the theft. "Did she touch it?" Vincent demanded. "No, she didn't touch it. She just stood there." Vincent tried to calm his breathing. Serena Diaz was just a scared girl, a waitress. Why would she remember anything? But the truth was, Vincent couldn't take the risk. If Damon realized the chaos of the prior business was a convenient distraction for massive internal theft, Vincent would be dead before morning. "Paul," Vincent said, his voice now dangerously soft. "You need to listen carefully. That girl is now the most dangerous thing in this organization. She saw the ledger. She might have seen the code. She is a liability, even if she doesn't know it. She's Damon's guest, boss. He's protecting her," Paul whispered, fear visible on his face. "Damon thinks she's a pawn in an outside war. We know she's a witness to an inside crime," Vincent countered. "Listen to the gossip. Leon already thinks she's a spy. Make the men around her nervous. Drop suggestions. Let them believe she's the leak that's been costing us money. They already hate her because she's prior blood." Vincent tapped his finger against his temple. If she dies in a panic, due to the paranoia Leon is already spreading, Damon will blame the outside enemies. He'll blame the people who sent the envelope. He'll never look inward. He handed Paul a small, heavy packet of cash. It has to look like an accident. Or a nervous, loyal guard taking out a dangerous spy. Get rid of the prior girl, Paul. And you secure our future. Back in the secure room, Serena was trying to distract herself by flipping through the channels on the massive television. Nothing helped. Suddenly, a strange feeling washed over her. Not a feeling, but a memory. She closed her eyes, and the open page of the red ledger flashed in her mind, perfectly clear. The column of codes. The repeated sequence next to the fake supply entries. $77K Red Oak. Why did I remember that? She whispered to herself. It was just a strange code. She started reciting it under her breath, a meaningless mantra. A new guard, a tall, intense man she hadn't seen before, suddenly paused outside her door. He was eating dinner, standing with his back to the wall, but he seemed to hear her faint murmur. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the hallway. Serena stopped talking immediately, feeling a fresh wave of fear. She was now not only the last daughter of a dead family, but she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. She didn't understand the code's meaning, but she understood the panic in the eyes of the guard who had just overheard a whisper. Serena realized, with a horrifying clarity, that she was no longer just running from her past, she was now trapped in Damon Vance's present, carrying a secret that could destroy him, and her, before the sun rose. The secured floor was quiet, but the air was thick with mistrust. Damon had been working almost non-stop, trying to track the source of the bloody envelope while simultaneously running background checks on his entire legitimate business operation, trying to figure out where millions of dollars were disappearing. He was tired, frustrated, and running out of time. He needed answers from Serena, and he needed them now. He decided to try a different approach. Instead of the intimidating interrogation in his office, he met her in the secure apartment's living area. Serena was wearing a comfortable but plain sweater and jeans, clothes borrowed from one of the compound staff. She sat stiffly on the sofa, her wide brown eyes full of a weary confusion. She looked like what she was, a normal girl whose life had been violently interrupted. Damon sat across from her in a heavy armchair. He was still wearing one of his expensive, dark suits, and the contrast between their outfits highlighted the immense distance between their two worlds. I need you to think, Serena, Damon said, his voice softer than Leon had ever heard it, but still commanding. I'm not asking you about crime. I'm asking you about memory. About your childhood. She nodded slowly. I'm trying, Mr. Vance. It's just, I was little. Everything before Aunt Lena is hazy. Did your parents, Sophia and Elias Pryor, ever visit? Even once? No. Aunt Lena said they died when I was a baby. Did she ever mention places? Cities? Words that didn't make sense. Serena squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating hard. This was terrifying for her. She didn't want to fail this powerful man who was her only shield. She mentally walked back through her memories, past the image of the red ledger and the code $77K Red Oak she kept trying to forget. There was this one place, Serena said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. Aunt Lena used to talk about the farm. It wasn't a real farm, I think. She said it was where she and my mother used to run away to when they were teenagers. Damon leaned forward immediately. The farm? Where was it? She never said, Serena admitted, frustrated. But she said there was a tree house. And a stone wall. She trailed off, her energy completely spent. The stress of the past week, the terror of the envelope, the sudden uprooting, the hostile faces of the guards, and now this agonizing forced recall, finally became too much for her tired body. Serena's vision tunneled. The room seemed to tilt, and the sharp lines of Damon's expensive suit began to blur. A sudden, dizzying wave of nausea washed over her. I don't feel good, she mumbled, clutching her head. Damon recognized the signs of syncope, fainting, immediately. He didn't know much about medicine, but he knew what fear and exhaustion did to the human body. He quickly rose from his chair. Serena, look at me. Breathe deeply, he commanded, but it was too late. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed instantly, falling straight off the sofa and toward the plush carpet. In a swift, almost clumsy reaction, Damon rushed forward. He managed to catch her, his arms wrapping awkwardly around her small frame. He was trying to lower her gently to the floor so her head wouldn't hit anything, but the angle was terrible. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, it looked less like an emergency rescue and more like a scene from a romantic drama. Damon, the cold, feared boss, was kneeling on the ground, holding the petite waitress against his massive chest, his head bent over her as he eased her down. "Marcus," he roared instantly. "Get the medical bag. Now." But the damage was already done. One of the security guards stationed just outside the room, a man named Paul, the same one being paid by the traitor Vincent, had been watching the exchange on the hidden internal security feed. Paul wasn't looking at the medical emergency. He was looking at the moment Damon Vance, the Rhino, lost control. He saw the cold mask break, replaced by a flash of genuine, human panic. He saw the awkward, protective embrace. And Paul, following Vincent's instructions perfectly, pulled out his personal phone, aimed it at the monitor, and recorded a shaky, 12-second clip. The guard immediately sent the video to Vincent, who, within minutes, had it distributed anonymously to a dozen key figures in the city's criminal underworld. The video spread like wildfire, a digital virus infecting the city's network of spies, enemies, and rivals. Within an hour, every major player in the Toronto and Montreal organizations had seen the grainy, short clip. The boss has a weakness. The humiliation for Damon Vance was total. Damon had built his empire on the myth of his absolute control and his emotional detachment. He was a force of nature, impersonal, unstoppable. His men were loyal because they believed he was incapable of showing weakness, especially for a woman, and especially for the daughter of a rival, dead family. His whispers began instantly, destroying the narrative of control he had established. His hiding her. His protecting her. She's not leverage, she's a love. Great Rhino has fallen for the enemy's daughter. He is sentimental. He's soft. If he can be distracted by a waitress, he can be defeated. The video did exactly what the traitor Vincent wanted. It completely shifted the focus from the missing millions to the supposed failure of Damon's personal judgment. It provided immediate, public justification for the disloyalty that was already simmering below the surface. Damon was attending a closed-door meeting with his lieutenants when he first heard the news, delivered through his trusted but visibly nervous advisor, Leon. "Damon, you need to see this," Leon said, sliding a burner phone across the table, the grainy video playing on a loop. Damon stared at the clip, himself, the feared crime boss, on his knees, holding the unconscious Serena. The sight was maddening. He hadn't just been caught protecting her, he had been caught caring. His face hardened into a mask of pure fury. "Who leaked this?" Damon demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that silenced the room. His lieutenants, men who had been fiercely loyal, now exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a man named Jerome from the downtown operations, cleared his throat. Jerome was a tall, imposing man, but his loyalty was purely mercenary. "Rhino," Jerome began, using Damon's nickname instead of his formal title. "If you're risking our territory and our reputation for a girl who is clearly bait, we have to talk about who is really leading this operation." The words hung in the air, the first open challenge to Damon's authority in years. The betrayal was no longer a quiet whisper among Leon and the traitors, it was an open declaration. The crack in his empire had just been blown wide open. Damon stood up, towering over the table. He was publicly humiliated, facing a coup led by the fear and distrust his own men felt toward Serena. But this was his element, controlled chaos. He looked at Jerome, then at the other men whose eyes were wavering. "You think I'm weak?" Damon said, his voice deadly quiet. "You think a viral video and a frightened girl can make me lose control of this city? You are fools." He pointed a finger at Jerome. "You just opened your mouth against the man who built the walls that protect your territory. Get out. All of you. And tell the streets that anyone who doubts my control will be the first one I make an example of." The lieutenants scrambled out, but the message was clear, the war had moved indoors. Damon's organization was now split, and the enemy wasn't just the external prior threat, it was the traitors who now had the excuse they needed to move against him. Damon knew he had to find the leak immediately. He needed to find the guard who recorded the video, and he needed to secure Serena, who was now not only a target but also the source of his public shame and internal downfall. Damon Vance was a man defined by efficiency, and the humiliation of the leaked video had sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. He knew the video was an inside job, designed not just to shame him, but to justify the mutiny brewing among his lieutenants, particularly Jerome. He immediately ordered Marcus to pull every security log for the past 24 hours from the secure building, focusing only on the third floor. I want to know which man had his phone out, which man was near the monitors, and which man wasn't where he was supposed to be, Damon commanded Marcus. Find the leak, Marcus. Quietly. Marcus, whose loyalty was absolute, understood the severity. If the leak wasn't plugged immediately, Damon's organization would fracture completely. While Damon began his frantic search for the traitor Paul and the puppet master Vincent, the threat from the outside grew exponentially, driven by a powerful man who wore a badge. Detective Silas Cy Norton was a high-ranking officer with the Toronto Police Service. He was a white man in his late 40s, tall and impeccably groomed, known for his relentless ambition and cold, piercing blue eyes. He often wore expensive, custom-made suits that looked better than the clothes of the criminals he chased. He had built his reputation on the ashes of the old city organizations, and he was deeply admired by the police commissioner. But Cy Norton was a venomous snake hidden in a respectable uniform. 12 years ago, when the prior syndicate was violently wiped out, Cy Norton, then a rising young sergeant, had been one of the first officers on the scene. He hadn't just investigated the massacre, he had been instrumental in orchestrating the final, deadly chaos, ensuring key evidence was destroyed and key enemies of the priors were protected. Cy had profited immensely, both financially and in terms of career advancement, by being the cleanup man. Now, the prior insignia had reappeared, and worse, the daughter was alive, hidden away by Damon Vance. Cy Norton's perfectly built life was threatening to crumble. He didn't just want Serena silenced, he was pathologically obsessed with controlling her fate. He viewed her as a loose end he personally needed to tie up. Cy was watching Damon's every move. He'd seen the grainy, humiliating video of Damon catching Serena. He didn't see romance, he saw a dangerous alliance. He was sitting in his large, corner office, the lights of the city glittering behind him, when his phone rang. It was an anonymous source, a small-time rival of Damon's looking to stir the pot, who gave Cy the exact address of Damon's secure safe house. So, the Great Rhino is hiding the prior girl, the only living witness to the original massacre, in his own fortress, Cy mused to himself, adjusting his tie. He thinks he's protecting her. He's just making my job easier. Cy stood up, grabbing his black leather coat. He wasn't going to send a squad, he was going himself. He couldn't risk Damon Vance making Serena talk, because if Serena started remembering anything about her mother's life, she would eventually uncover the corrupt web that Cy Norton had woven 12 years ago. Cy's goal wasn't just to silence her, it was to possess her, to control the truth she represented. He genuinely believed that if he took her, he could protect her from the underworld, thereby protecting himself from exposure. Meanwhile, Damon had tracked the security logs to the guard Paul. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Paul's movement was irregular during the exact time of Serena's collapse, and his access logs showed he viewed the surveillance feed from a remote terminal moments later. Damon confronted Marcus. Find Paul. Bring him to the warehouse. Do not hurt him. I need him alive to tell me who gave the order. Marcus, already tense from the internal revolt, moved to execute the order. Just as Marcus and two loyal men left the secure apartment building, a sleek, unmarked black sedan pulled up to the front entrance. Cy Norton, dressed sharply and carrying a confident, official air, emerged. He walked past the lobby attendant, flashing his gold detective badge. Police business. Confidential, Cy announced, his voice carrying the authority of the law. I have reason to believe the woman known as Serena Diaz is being held here against her will and is a potential witness to a major crime. The security guard at the front desk was rattled. Damon Vance's building was meant to be impenetrable. They dealt with criminals, not high-ranking police brass. Sir, I can't let you up without a warrant, the guard stammered, his hand hovering over the silent alarm button. Warrant? Cy Norton smiled, a cold, humorless expression that didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here on official business, son. I'm here for a consultation with Mr. Vance. We have a mutual problem. You can call him right now and tell him Detective Norton is here to discuss his little witness problem. The guard hesitated, then nervously called Damon. Damon was just receiving the initial report on Paul when the call came in. Detective Norton. Damon instantly felt a knot of dread twist in his stomach. The police were usually on his payroll and kept their distance. Cy Norton, however, was notoriously clean, or so the city believed. Send him up, Damon finally ordered, his voice tight. This was a direct, brazen challenge, and Damon knew it couldn't be ignored. He had to play the straight man. A few minutes later, Cy Norton stepped onto the secure floor. He surveyed the luxurious apartment, his eyes lingering on the heavy locks and the obvious security features. He took in the details, the expensive art, the high ceilings, and finally, his gaze landed on Serena, who stood near the window, looking small and frightened. Mr. Vance, Cy said, extending a hand to Damon. His handshake was firm, professional. Silas Norton, TPS Major Crimes. I apologize for the intrusion, but I am very concerned about Ms. Diaz's well-being. Damon returned the handshake, his face a mask of polite aggression. Detective. I assure you, Ms. Diaz is perfectly safe here. She is a former employee who received a highly disturbing threat. I offered her a temporary sanctuary until the situation cools down. A bloody envelope with a notorious, dead syndicate's insignia. Cy raised an eyebrow, his professionalism never wavering. That sounds like a direct threat to public safety, Mr. Vance. It requires police intervention. And frankly, this arrangement, a material witness being held by a man with your reputation, looks like kidnapping. Serena looked from the sleek, smiling detective to the towering, tense crime boss. Both men radiated power, but the detective's cold politeness felt far more threatening than Damon's blunt command. Cy then turned his focus entirely to Serena, his blue eyes locking onto hers with an unsettling intensity. Ms. Diaz, Cy said, his voice dropping to a seductive, empathetic tone. I am here to protect you. The people who sent you that message are dangerous. Mr. Vance is just as dangerous. I want to take you somewhere safe, under police protection. You can tell me everything you know. He took a step toward her. Serena felt a shiver of true terror. Something in his eyes, despite the kind words, felt predatory. She looked at Damon, seeking his permission. Serena is fine here, detective, Damon interjected sharply, stepping between Cy and the girl. She is a witness, not a suspect. And I am her protector. Protector. Cy laughed softly, a dry, humorless sound. We both saw the video, Mr. Vance. This isn't protection. This looks like possession. If she stays here, any harm that comes to her is on you. And I will make sure the city knows that. The implied threat was clear. Damon's public image was already shattered by the video. If Cy Norton took Serena, he would not only rob Damon of his leverage, but also gain full control over the last remaining prior, the key to unlocking a 12-year-old conspiracy that Cy desperately wanted to keep buried. Damon had a choice: risk an all-out confrontation with a highly respected detective right now, or let the snake slip away with the only piece he needed to win. Damon Vance stood stiffly as Detective Cy Norton left the secure floor. Cy's parting shot had been a thin-lipped smile and the promise that he would be filing official paperwork for obstruction of justice by the morning. The meeting had solved nothing, but it had bought Damon a few precious hours. The moment the outer door clicked shut, Damon let out a slow, controlled breath. He turned to Serena, his eyes dark with residual anger. His police. He's dangerous, Damon stated bluntly. And he is not your protector. Serena was shaking again, her earlier fear completely renewed. She stood near the sofa, clutching her arms, looking at the door Cy had just walked through. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. He was so polite. But, he felt colder than anyone. Like he was looking right through me. She finally sank onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands, silent tears beginning to run down her cheeks. Why do they want me? I'm nobody. I just want to go back to serving drinks and paying my rent. Damon watched her, the stone mask of the crime boss beginning to crack under the pressure of his own exhaustion and the intense vulnerability of the girl in front of him. He had spent his whole life avoiding messy, raw emotions. He dealt in strategy, territory, and controlled violence. He didn't deal with broken people. But seeing Serena curled up and weeping, the sounds of her pain muffled by her hands, took Damon back to a place he hadn't allowed himself to visit in 15 years. He walked over and sat carefully on the edge of the large coffee table in front of her. He didn't touch her, but his presence, usually a threat, was now simply solid and heavy. "Stop crying, Serena," he said, not harshly, but with a weary finality. "Crying is weakness here. You need to be strong." Serena slowly lowered her hands, her eyes red and puffy. "I can't be strong, Mr. Vance. I'm scared. You don't know what it feels like to be so helpless." Damon didn't flinch. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the daughter of his enemy, but a mirror reflecting his own deepest failure. "Actually, I do," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly murmur that was utterly devoid of the usual command. "I know exactly what it feels like." He paused, collecting a memory that had been locked away in a cold, dark place. He hadn't shared this with anyone, not Leon, not Marcus, and certainly not his rivals. This was the true origin of the Rhino. 15 years ago, Damon began, his eyes fixed on some distant point on the wall. "I had a cousin. Keisha. She was barely 19. Smart. Finishing university. She was the one good thing my family had. She worked 2 jobs to pay her tuition." He stopped, taking a slow, deep breath. "One of those jobs was waitressing. Just like you. She worked at a little coffee shop down on Queen Street." Serena watched him, mesmerized. This was the first time she had seen the man, not the monster. "One night," Damon continued, his voice tight with controlled pain, "she finished late. She was walking to her bus stop. She was passing through a small, dark alley near the shop. Some low-life thugs were trying to shake her down for her tips. She fought back." Damon finally looked at Serena. His hazel eyes were clouded with ancient grief. "I found her hours later," he said simply. "In that alley. Shaking. Terrified. She was hurt, but she was alive. She was hiding something, a necklace her grandmother had given her, clutched behind her back." He gestured to Serena. "When I saw you in that alley, Serena, behind the platinum fork, shaking, terrified, clutching that envelope behind your back, you were her. You were Keisha. I took Keisha to the hospital, but it was too late. The trauma, it broke her. She never recovered. She couldn't leave her house. She couldn't sleep. She dropped out of school. And 3 months later, she took her own life." A profound silence filled the room. Serena felt a fresh wave of empathy wash over her, eclipsing her own fear. "I couldn't protect her," Damon finished, his voice raw. "I was too busy building this organization, trying to protect the family, and I missed the one person who needed me most. I missed the trauma right in front of my face." He looked her straight in the eye. "That's why you are here, Serena. This isn't just about leverage or controlling the war. This is about Keisha. You are not going to break because of something that happened in my alley. I swore I would never let that kind of quiet horror happen on my watch again." Serena understood now. His protective instinct was a deep, personal scar. The initial reaction of the feared Mafia boss hadn't been cold calculation. It had been a primal trigger, an attempt to redeem a 15-year-old failure. "I am sorry about Keisha," Serena whispered, tears flowing freely, but this time, they were tears of connection, not fear. "Aunt Lena always told me, the world judges you based on your strength, but it's okay to be broken if you are honest about it." Damon nodded, absorbing her simple wisdom. "I need you to be honest with me, Serena. You didn't just faint from stress yesterday. You saw something on my ledger, didn't you? Something that made you worry?" Serena hesitated for a moment, then, driven by the new, fragile trust, she made a terrifying admission. "Yes," she confessed. "When you left the desk. My memory is good. Too good. I saw the numbers. And I saw a code. It was next to restaurant supplies. I kept saying it to myself like a chant." Damon leaned closer, his interest now completely overriding his personal pain. "What was the code?" Serena took a deep breath. $77K Red Oak. Damon's entire body went rigid. The frustration and worry vanished, replaced by deadly, icy certainty. $77,000 was the exact amount that was supposed to be in a secure holding account that had been secretly emptied only 3 days prior. REDOAK was the internal code name for a specific European bank used only by his most trusted men for large transfers. The internal betrayal was massive. The money wasn't just missing, it was stolen by someone intimately familiar with his secure accounts. "Thank you, Serena," Damon said, his voice quiet but intense. "That code just told me exactly who the leak is, and that the person who leaked the video is also the one stealing the money." A knock came on the door. It was Marcus. "Rhino," Marcus said, his face grave. "We found Paul. He bolted, but we cornered him in a storage unit. He's talking now." And he named his boss. "It's Vincent." Damon stood up, the pain from the past now completely channeled into lethal resolve. Serena's trauma had unlocked the identity of the traitors, protecting his future. He looked down at Serena, his new vow solidified. "They tried to use you to cover their theft, Serena. They tried to use my vulnerability to destroy me. That ends tonight." "I believe you, Mr. Vance," she said simply. Damon nodded. He wasn't doing this for leverage anymore. He was doing this for Keisha, and for the scared waitress who had survived the horrors of his own alley. He walked toward the door, ready to clean house. Damon Vance was a man who rarely showed emotion, but in the sterile, quiet atmosphere of the warehouse where Paul was being held, his rage was palpable. Paul, the cowardly guard who leaked the video, was talking. He had confirmed that Vincent, the manager of Damon's legitimate businesses, was the mastermind of the theft, using the code Serena remembered. The confrontation with Vincent was swift and deadly efficient. Damon didn't need to shout. He simply laid out the evidence: the code $77K REDOAK, the timing of the theft, and Paul's frantic confession. Vincent, the middle-aged man with the thick glasses, crumbled instantly. He confessed that he had used the chaos of the prior resurfacing as a smokescreen, hoping Damon would be too distracted by the external war to audit his books. "I only hired Paul to keep an eye on things, Damon. I didn't mean for the video to leak and cause this, I just needed time." Vincent pleaded, sweat dripping down his temples. "You tried to kill the girl, Vincent," Damon stated, his voice a flat statement of fact. "You pushed the narrative that she was a spy, knowing she was an innocent witness to your crime. You fractured my organization and challenged my authority. For money." The resolution was brutal, necessary, and swift, demonstrating to any wavering lieutenant, like Jerome, that Damon Vance was still the master of his domain. The internal threat was decapitated. Damon had won the first war, but he had paid for it with his dignity and his exposure. As Damon was overseeing the final cleanup of the internal mess, a new, far more dangerous problem was unfolding across the city. The Moetti family was one of the largest, oldest, and most respectable criminal organizations in North America. They were Italian, controlled vast territory in New York and were the primary rivals and historical enemies of the defunct Pryor Syndicate. They were led by Marco Moetti, a calm, ruthless man in his 60s who favored silk shirts and quiet dominance. The city's general history, the one taught in police academies and whispered in the streets, was that the Pryor Syndicate had been wiped out by internal betrayal and a subsequent explosion of violence. But the real, buried truth was that the Moetti family had orchestrated the entire Pryor massacre 12 years ago. They had framed a minor, long-gone crime group for the initial attack, triggering the chaos and moving in to finish the job themselves, thereby eliminating their biggest rival without drawing police attention to their own hands. Serena, the daughter of Sophia Pryor, was the last person who could expose this setup. The Moetti family had assumed that every single member of the Pryor bloodline was dead. But tonight, Marco Moetti received an anonymous, encrypted package. It contained 2 items: a copy of the leaked video showing Damon Vance protecting Serena, and a detailed dossier on Serena Diaz, confirming her true identity as the daughter of Sophia Pryor. The dossier had been compiled and sent by Detective Cy Norton, who was using the threat of exposure as leverage against the Moettis. Cy knew the Moettis were the real killers, and he planned to use their panic to eliminate Serena without getting his own hands dirty. Marco Moetti sat in his opulent, silent office in New York, staring at the screen. He was a man who never showed fear, but the sight of Serena's face, alive and under the protection of his rival, Damon Vance, made his blood run cold. "Impossible," Moetti muttered, crushing the printout of the dossier in his elegant hand. The child was dead. We confirmed it. His chief lieutenant, Luca, a heavyset man with a permanent scowl, stood ready. Marco, what does this mean? If she is alive, and if Damon Vance finds out the truth? Moetti looked up, his eyes now hard and focused. It means the entire balance of power shifts. It means the biggest lie of my career comes undone. If that girl talks, every major crime family that benefited from the prior collapse will turn on us. They cannot know the truth. Moetti pointed at the image of the vulnerable girl. She is not leverage, Luca. She is a ticking clock. Damon Vance thinks he's hiding a girl with a grudge. We know she's hiding a historical truth that will bring down the Moetti family. Do we go to war with Vance? Luca asked, readying himself for the inevitable. No. Not yet, Moetti decided, leaning back in his chair. A war is loud. It draws attention. Damon Vance is already weakened by that ridiculous video and the internal fighting. He will be watching the front door. Luca, you and your best men will slip into Toronto. You will not engage Vance or his men. You will move like ghosts. Moetti looked at his lieutenant, his expression deadly. Find the girl. She must be silenced before she remembers one single thing about her mother's past or the events of that night. Make it look like a tragic accident. And bring me proof it is done. The external war had officially begun, driven by the desperation to bury a historical crime. Back in the Toronto safe house, Damon was exhausted but triumphant. He was talking to Serena, explaining the fallout of her crucial information. The code you remembered, Serena, was everything, Damon explained, sitting next to her on the sofa. Vincent and Paul are gone. The organization is stable again. You saved me from a massive internal collapse. Serena looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pride. I helped you. More than you know, Damon affirmed. He was seeing her differently now. Not as a liability, not as leverage, but as a person with unexpected strength and loyalty. But what about the prior insignia? Serena asked, the original source of her terror. Who sent that envelope? If it wasn't Vincent. Damon sighed. Vincent confirmed that the prior message came from an outside source. It was delivered right when he needed a distraction. We believe it was sent by someone who knew you were alive, someone who wanted to start trouble between the old prior enemies. He reached out and gently put his hand over hers, a genuine, protective gesture. He was no longer worried about the optics, he was worried about her safety. The internal threat is gone, Damon told her. But the people who sent that insignia are still out there, Serena. And now that I've been humiliated publicly, every major player knows you are the key to my stability. They will come for you. Just then, Damon's secure phone buzzed. It was Silas, his information man, his voice tight with alarm. Rhino, I have a red alert, Silas reported. 3 flights landed an hour ago from New York. Undocumented, high-level travel. Discreet. It's the Moetti family. Marco Moetti's top security detail. They are in Toronto. Damon tensed. The Moettis. The most powerful, untouchable family. They never came to Toronto unless the threat was existential. Why the Moettis, Silas? They had no beef with the priors, Damon questioned. Silas hesitated. Rhino, the information I'm getting now, from years ago, it's messy. The Moettis may not have just been rivals to the priors. They may have been the ones who engineered the whole thing. If Serena is alive, she exposes the largest frame job in the last 20 years. The Moettis need her dead, Damon. More than anyone. Damon looked at Serena, then back at the phone, his hazel eyes narrowing to lethal slits. He was no longer fighting a small, regional war over territory. He was in a full-scale confrontation with the most powerful crime family on the coast, all to protect the one person who carried the secret that could destroy them all. The Moettis want her dead because she threatens their entire history, Damon concluded. Marcus. Double the perimeter. We are going into lockdown. Damon put down the phone and looked at Serena, a silent vow of protection passing between them. The trauma of the alley was now matched by the terrifying reality of the new, global threat. The fight had escalated to the highest possible level. The news that the Moetti family was in Toronto, the powerful, historical enemies of the Priors, changed the atmosphere in Damon's safe house from a tense shelter to a fortified bunker. Damon Vance was calm, but his eyes were constantly calculating. He had neutralized the thieves, Vincent and Paul, but the most dangerous betrayal was still active, the lieutenant who had seized upon Damon's momentary weakness to challenge his leadership. That man was Jerome. Jerome, the same lieutenant who had challenged Damon after the video leaked, was indeed the true viper within Damon's inner circle. Jerome was ambitious, tired of taking orders, and believed Damon's attachment to Serena proved he was too soft for the modern underworld. Jerome wasn't just spreading rumors, he was the one behind the original threats. He was the one who had sent the bloody envelope to Serena. Jerome had discovered Serena's true identity through a highly corrupt contact in the Historical City Records Department. He had sent the envelope to bait Damon into protecting her, knowing two things. First, that Damon had a weakness for protecting the innocent, due to his trauma with Keisha. And second, that bringing a prior heir into the fold would instantly alienate other leaders like Leon and create the internal instability Jerome needed to stage a coup. The goal was simple: use Serena as a distraction, force Damon out, take control, and then hand Serena over to the Moettis for a huge profit and an immediate alliance with the most powerful family in the country. Damon knew something was wrong. After confirming the Moetti presence, he had ordered his top lieutenants to secure key strategic points across the city. All except Jerome reported back immediately. Damon called an emergency meeting in the main operations room of the safe house, a room deep underground. He told Marcus to bring Serena with them. "I want her near me," Damon told Marcus. "If they are coming for me, they are coming for her. And I trust her more than anyone else in this building right now." When Damon, Marcus, and Serena entered the ops room, 3 lieutenants were waiting. They were tight-lipped and tense. Jerome arrived last, sauntering in with a smirk that was completely out of place. "Jerome," Damon said, his voice level. "Where are your men? Why didn't you report your troop movements?" Jerome leaned against the door frame, his hands tucked into his pockets. He was a tall, imposing man, but his arrogance tonight made him look monstrous. "My men are where they need to be, Damon," Jerome replied, not using Damon's nickname or his title. "Securing our future." The atmosphere shattered. The other 2 lieutenants looked from Jerome to Damon, realizing they were walking into a loyalty trap. "Your future, Jerome? Or the organization's?" Damon's hazel eyes were ice cold. He knew this was the moment. Jerome smiled, and it was a horrifying thing to see. The organization's future is no longer tied to a man who gets sentimental over a dead rival's daughter. You let that girl in, Damon. The prior girl. You risked everything for a lie. You let a piece of trash history ruin the stability we built. He gestured contemptuously toward Serena. "She is a spy, a distraction, and she is dead weight. You should have cut her loose the moment she arrived." Serena, standing just behind Damon and Marcus, gasped softly. The man who had caused her initial terror, the man who sent the bloody envelope, was standing right there. "You sent the envelope," Damon realized, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "You tried to provoke me into an emotional response to create this instability." "I gave you rope to hang yourself," Jerome corrected, his voice rising in confidence. "You're weak, Damon. The video proved it. The Moettis are here because of her, and you can't fight them and hold this city at the same time." "I can." Jerome straightened up, pulling his hands from his pockets. In each hand, he held a sleek, black silenced pistol. Several security guards who had been standing near the exits also moved, locking the doors and aiming their weapons at Marcus and the 2 confused lieutenants. The coup was active. "This is a vote of no confidence, Damon," Jerome declared, his voice ringing with triumph. "The organization is taking a new direction. You will step down, leave the city, and the girl will be handed over to the Moettis. It's profitable, and it brings stability." The 2 other lieutenants, caught completely off guard, instantly dropped to their knees, trying to signal their neutrality in the near coup. Damon stood his ground, a perfect picture of calm authority, despite the guns aimed at his chest. Marcus, standing next to him, was like a statue, ready to move but waiting for the boss's command. "You think you can lead us, Jerome?" Damon said, his tone mocking. "You were stealing from us while I was building this empire. You sent a terrified girl a message sealed with blood just to make a quick power play. You're a coward, Jerome. Not a leader. Jerome's eyes narrowed, his triumph flickering into fury. I'm taking control. The girl dies now, and you die right after. He took a step forward, raising one of the silenced guns and aiming it directly at Serena's head. This is what real leadership looks like, Damon. No sentiment, just business. But Jerome had made one fatal mistake. He had focused entirely on Damon and Serena, forgetting the presence of the quiet man who served Damon without question. The moment Jerome raised his weapon, Marcus exploded into action. Marcus was a master of close-quarters defense. In one blurred, lightning-fast motion, Marcus shoved Damon and Serena backward, drawing his own weapon, and fired. The silenced shots from both sides echoed strangely in the underground room. Damon grabbed Serena, pulling her behind a large metal console. Chaos erupted. Jerome and his loyal guards opened fire, but Marcus, now joined by Damon, returned fire with focused, lethal precision. Damon moved with a speed and ferocity that shocked even Serena. He wasn't just a boss, he was a trained, deadly fighter. Damon and Marcus used the console as cover, taking down Jerome's men quickly and efficiently. The two loyal lieutenants, scrambling on the floor, suddenly found their courage and began to fight back against the traitors. Jerome, realizing his coup was dissolving into a bloodbath, screamed and turned to run for the door. He's getting away. Serena cried out, gripping Damon's arm. Damon didn't hesitate. He emerged from behind the console, raising his pistol, and fired 2 precise shots. Jerome fell heavily against the metal door, the coup silenced instantly. Damon quickly checked the room. 3 of Jerome's men were down. Jerome was dead. The remaining 2 traitors were quickly disarmed and secured by the loyal lieutenants, now desperate to prove their allegiance. The entire organization, already weakened by the video and the Moetti threat, had just survived a violent, bloody near coup. Damon stood among the fallout, breathing heavily. He was physically fine, but the cost of the betrayal was immense. He walked over to Serena, who was still trembling behind the console. He knelt down to meet her eye level. "It's over," he said, his voice still ragged. "The snake is out." He helped her stand up. Serena looked at the carnage, at the body of the man who wanted her dead and had threatened her with a gun a minute ago, and then looked at the cold, hard man who had just risked his life to protect her. "You saved me," she whispered, her earlier terror giving way to a profound sense of awe and responsibility. Damon simply nodded. He knew the fight had only just begun. The internal threat was gone, but the external threat, the Moettis, driven by the need to hide a historical massacre, was still out there, and now they knew exactly where Serena was. After the bloody confrontation with Jerome, the safe house was on high alert, but strangely quiet. Damon had successfully quelled the near coup and eliminated the traitor, but the victory felt hollow. Now, the most significant threat, the Moetti family, was officially in Toronto, lurking like predators in the darkness. Damon had immediately put Marcus in charge of triple-checking the perimeter and preparing for a potential siege. He then returned to Serena. The danger was escalating, and he needed her to remain hidden. Serena was still processing the violence she had witnessed. She was scared, but the sight of Damon fighting to protect her had replaced her initial terror with a strange, fierce loyalty. She believed in him now. She believed he was protecting her out of a sense of duty for his lost cousin, Keisha. But that belief was about to be obliterated. Damon had been careless. When confronting Jerome, he had left his most important, heavily encrypted briefcase open in the ops room. Marcus brought the case back to the secured apartment for Damon. Serena was sitting on the sofa, trying to compose herself, when Marcus walked in and placed the briefcase on the coffee table. He was retrieving a first aid kit when the side pocket of the briefcase snagged on the table's edge. A small, folded piece of thick, glossy photo paper slipped out unnoticed, landing silently on the plush rug near Serena's feet. Serena picked it up, expecting it to be some sort of business contact card. But it was an old photograph, slightly faded, creased down the middle. She unfolded it, and the blood drained from her face. It was an image taken years ago, perhaps a decade or more. The setting looked like a lavish, sunlit dinner. In the center, smiling broadly, was a man Serena instantly recognized from Aunt Lena's few blurry photos. Elias Pryor, her late father. He was dressed in a pristine white suit, and he was shaking hands with a younger version of a man she knew intimately. He was shaking hands with Damon Vance. Damon, perhaps in his mid-20s, looked slightly heavier but wore the same cold intensity in his hazel eyes. He was wearing a dark suit, contrasting sharply with her father's white one. The smile on Elias Pryor's face was genuine and friendly. Damon's expression, however, was strained, almost guilty. He looked like a man being forced to pose for a picture he desperately didn't want taken. Serena felt a cold wave of betrayal crash over her. This wasn't just a picture, it was a lie, a history Damon had erased. She stood up slowly, the photograph shaking in her hand, and turned to face Damon, who was checking his weapons on the nearby table. "What is this, Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet, completely stripped of fear, filled only with heartbroken accusation. Damon turned, saw the photograph, and his carefully constructed composure shattered. His eyes widened slightly in pure shock, a look Serena had never seen on his face before. He hadn't seen the photo in years. He thought it had been destroyed. "Where did you get that?" Damon demanded, moving quickly toward her, attempting to take the photograph. Serena backed away, clutching the photo to her chest. "Don't touch it. Don't touch me. You knew him. You knew my father. You were friends with the man whose family you said was wiped out." She waved the photo in the air. "You didn't find me crying in an alley by accident. You found the daughter of a man you already knew. Why did you hide this? Why did you lie to me? What secret are you protecting?" Damon stopped. He knew there was no covering this up. The damage was done, and his carefully constructed narrative of the protective, detached boss had just crumbled. "We were not friends, Serena," Damon said, his voice dropping to a somber, grave tone. "Your father and I were not friends. We were allies." He slowly walked to the edge of the sofa and sat down, resignation settling heavily on his massive shoulders. Elias Pryor was not just a powerful man, he was a smart one, Damon began, looking up at her, forcing her to see the agonizing truth in his eyes. "When I was starting out, challenging the old power structures, Elias gave me capital. He gave me territory. He saw a future where we could work side by side, controlling the city." "So you were partners," Serena whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "I tried to be," Damon admitted, running a tired hand over his face. "But Elias was a violent man, Serena. He was unpredictable. He was cruel. And when he demanded I take part in a particular operation, one that involved targeting innocent people, I refused." Damon sighed, the weight of the past crushing him. "That picture was taken at a dinner meant to celebrate our formal alliance. I was already planning to break away. That look on my face, the one you think looks guilty? It is. I was guilty of planning to cut him out completely." Serena looked at the photo, then at Damon, trying to reconcile the protective man of before with the calculating man in the picture. "But why did you tell me you wiped them out?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you act like you knew nothing about the Pryors, only the insignia?" Damon stood up again, moving toward the window, looking out at the cold city night. "Because I am involved in their destruction, Serena. Just not the way you think." He turned back, the truth flooding out of him, a confession of his darkest secrets. "When I broke the alliance, I created a massive vacuum. Elias Pryor had too many enemies. When the Moetti family attacked, the family that's here right now, the ones who really did the framing, they came for the Pryors. I had the power to stop it, Serena. I had the men. But I didn't." He looked utterly defeated. "I saw it as my opportunity to step in and take control of the city without having to go to war with Elias myself. I let the Moettis do the dirty work. I let the massacre happen. I stood back and watched the Pryor syndicate burn, and then I stepped in to control the ashes. That's why I'm guilty in that picture," Damon confessed, his voice thick with self-loathing. "I shook his hand, and a year later, I signed his death warrant by choosing neutrality. I hated your father, but I never intended for your mother or the children to die." Serena felt her knees buckle. The man who had redeemed himself by saving her from a similar fate had been the one who paved the road to her family's original tragedy. His guilt wasn't about a simple lie, it was about indirect responsibility for the massacre. She finally understood her presence here. It wasn't just about saving Keisha, it was about Damon attempting to pay a 12-year-old debt. "You're not protecting me, Mr. Vance," Serena whispered, tears finally falling again. "You're trying to clean your conscience." "Maybe I am," Damon admitted, his eyes holding hers. "But it doesn't change the fact that the people who really killed your family, the Moettis, are in this city now. And I am the only person who can stop them from finishing the job. Whether it's for my conscience or for you, the outcome is the same." The trust was broken, but the necessity remained. Serena knew Damon was guilty of a dark past, but she also knew he was telling the truth about the current danger. She still needed the rhino. But now, she saw the flawed, haunted man beneath the armor. Damon felt a profound shift. She knew his darkest secret. She could destroy him with that photo and the truth, yet she was still standing there. He had nothing left to hide, which, in a perverse way, made their bond stronger and more honest than before. That was a huge moment of honesty and heartbreak. Serena now knows Damon's secret involvement in the prior downfall, but the immediate threat from the Moettis remains the focus. The final act is set, Damon, fueled by guilt and a new, desperate need to protect Serena, against the powerful Moettis, who are trying to bury a historical crime, and the lurking police threat of Cy Norton. The moment of confession had passed, leaving behind a raw, fractured trust between Damon and Serena. Damon's focus was now singular: protect Serena and survive the night. He knew the Moetti family was closing in, and that Detective Cy Norton was likely using their arrival to finalize his own plans. Damon didn't wait. He moved Serena out of the compromised safe house immediately, utilizing a network of tunnels and secondary vehicles that Marcus had prepared. The Moetti ambush. The war began on the streets of downtown Toronto. Luca, Marco Moetti's top lieutenant, had been tracking the known movements of Damon's loyal men. Luca had secured a location, a high-end hotel suite, and was waiting for Damon to make a mistake. Damon and Marcus were moving Serena in a convoy of 3 unmarked cars, heading toward a secure property near the docks. The silence was broken violently when 2 black SUVs, Moetti men, slammed into the first car, blocking a narrow bridge over the Don River. Shootouts erupted instantly. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a professional, brutal ambush. Damon, in the third car with Serena, ordered his driver to break through the blockade. "Stay down, Serena." Damon roared, pulling out his weapon and firing cover shots through the back windshield. The brief, intense battle showcased Damon's raw power and Marcus's strategic genius. They fought off the initial Moetti attack, but the city was now alert. Sirens wailed across the financial district. As Damon's convoy sped toward the docks, another, more subtle threat was activated: political interference. Detective Cy Norton, seeing the opportunity presented by the chaos, made his move. He knew that the Moettis were here to kill Serena, which would solve his problem for him. But he needed to control the outcome and eliminate Damon Vance in the process. Cy contacted the police commissioner and fabricated a story. Damon Vance was responsible for the violence and was kidnapping a material witness, Serena Diaz. He presented the grainy leaked video, Chapter 5, as proof of Damon's obsession and abuse of power. Within minutes, police barricades were established, and a citywide APB, All Points Bulletin, was issued for Damon Vance and the cars associated with the abducted Serena Diaz. "Rhino, we have a problem," Marcus reported over the secure radio. "The police are closing in. They're calling it a kidnapping. Cy Norton is framing you." Damon cursed under his breath. The dirty cop wasn't just chasing them, he was changing the narrative, turning Damon into the public enemy. The legal system was now weaponized against them. Serena's courage and the revelation. They arrived at the docks, a maze of cold, dark warehouses. Damon pulled Serena out of the car and rushed her into a massive, empty warehouse that served as an emergency hideout. Serena was no longer just the terrified waitress. She had seen the raw violence of the coup and the sheer desperation of the Moettis. She clutched the photograph of Damon and her father in her pocket. "Damon," Serena said, using his first name for the first time, her voice firm despite the rattling gunshots outside. "If Cy Norton and the Moettis are both coming for me, there has to be something more. What if the police were involved in the original massacre, too? That's what Cy wants to hide." Her words hit Damon like a physical blow. He had only considered the Moettis and his own guilt. But Cy Norton's relentless, almost desperate pursuit made sense now. Cy was too clean, too powerful to just be a minor corrupt cop. You're right, Damon conceded, scanning the warehouse perimeter. Cy Norton was a rising sergeant 12 years ago. If the Moettis framed another family, someone in law enforcement had to clear the scene and destroy the evidence. Serena had just identified the final, missing piece of the conspiracy. The dirty cops and the rival clan, Moetti, worked together on the original massacre. The warehouse doors were blasted open. It wasn't the police, it was Luca and the remaining Moetti squad. They had tracked Damon's convoy using a silent GPS device they had planted on one of the cars. At the same time, Cy Norton, anticipating the location, arrived silently with a small team of loyal, dirty officers, blocking the rear exits. Damon and Serena were trapped between two massive forces. Luca. The girl is ours. Cy Norton yelled, stepping out of the shadows at the rear, weapon raised. She's a material witness. Stand down. Witness or not, she is prior blood. Luca roared back from the front, his Italian accent thick with rage. She threatens our history. Back off, detective, or this becomes a police massacre. The entire citywide chaos, the betrayals, shootouts, kidnappings, political interference, and rival clans, had converged on this single, dusty warehouse, with the frightened, yet newly courageous, waitress at its center. Damon pushed Serena behind a tower of stacked wooden pallets. They both want to silence you, Serena. You have the truth, Damon told her, loading a fresh magazine into his weapon. He knew he couldn't fight both sides and win. Serena gripped the photograph in her pocket. She looked at Damon, the man who let her family die but was now sacrificing everything to keep her alive. She was no longer helpless. Damon, she said, her eyes shining with resolve. We can't just shoot our way out. We have to use the truth. You need to expose Cy Norton and the Moettis at the same time. The once-forgotten waitress was ready to fight back, not with a gun, but with the painful, powerful truth she held in her heart and in her photographic memory. The massive warehouse was choked with tension. At the front, the Moetti family, led by Luca, aiming to bury the historical truth. At the rear, Detective Cy Norton and his dirty cops, aiming to frame Damon and silence the last witness. In the middle, Damon and Serena, hiding behind stacked pallets, preparing for a fight they couldn't win with bullets alone. Damon looked at Serena, gripping his weapon. He knew this was the end of the line. Serena, listen to me, Damon said, his voice low and urgent, cutting through the standoff. I need you to remember everything, the code, the photo, the name, the farm. Everything. I remember, Damon, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Damon closed his eyes for a fleeting second, the chaos around them dissolving. He had one last secret, one last truth to share before they faced death, a truth that tied everything together. You asked why I reacted so strongly that night in the alley, Damon said, his eyes now fixed on hers. It wasn't just Keisha. He took a deep breath. The night of the massacre, 12 years ago, I stood by and let the Moettis attack your father. But your mother, Sophia Pryor, she wasn't in the main compound. She was hiding. She found me just as I was leaving the territory. He looked into Serena's eyes, the hazel filled with the pain of the memory. She was bleeding, Serena. She was dying. She knew what was happening. She pressed a bundle into my arms and told me one thing, this is my child. Please, promise me you will protect her. Don't let them find her. Damon paused, the sounds of the warehouse fading away. I gave her my word. I promised your dying mother I would protect her child. I gave the baby, you, to your Aunt Lena, Sophia's friend. I paid Lena to disappear and raise you as Serena Diaz, erasing the prior name completely. I never saw you again. I never knew which waitress you were, or where Lena went. Damon's final, powerful confession finished the circle. He hadn't known the waitress was the girl he promised to protect. He had been triggered by the sight of her helplessness, Keisha's trauma, and then horrified to find out she was the promised daughter he had failed to follow up on, whose life he was meant to shield. The guilt, Serena, Damon whispered. It was never just standing by. It was breaking a dying mother's promise. Serena felt her heart explode. The fear, the anger, and the heartbreak melted into a wave of profound, overwhelming emotional clarity. Damon Vance was not her enemy, he was her reluctant guardian, haunted by a sacred vow he thought he had broken. the exposure and the city shaken. This emotional clarity gave Serena the courage she needed. She suddenly stood up from behind the pallets, stepping into the open where both Luca's and Cy Norton's men could see her. "Stop!" Serena screamed, her voice echoing through the massive warehouse, momentarily silencing the guns. She was trembling, but her voice was clear and commanding. She held up the photograph, the evidence of Damon and her father's alliance, in one hand, and with the other, she pointed directly at Detective Cy Norton. "Detective Norton!" Serena shouted. "You were paid by the Moetti family to frame the massacre on another organization. You destroyed the evidence 12 years ago, and now you want to kill me because I am the last witness." She pointed to the Moettis. "And you, Luca. You came here because you were afraid of the truth I carry. The truth about the code $77K Red AK, which shows you are still laundering money with dirty police right here in Toronto." The accusation hung in the air. Luca roared in fury, but Cy Norton froze. The reference to the obscure, secret code $77K Red AK and the direct accusation of framing the massacre were too specific to be dismissed as a lie. The chaos of the moment was interrupted by the sound of external sirens, real police, massive reinforcements arriving. Damon, realizing Serena's strategy, had given Marcus one final instruction: leak the entire situation and the names to a friendly source in the media and the one honest captain he knew in major crimes. The warehouse was now surrounded by honest police, drawn in by the overwhelming sound of the shootout and the sudden influx of evidence provided by Marcus. Justice, hope, and love. The sudden arrival of honest backup shattered the balance of the standoff. Luca and his Moetti men, realizing they were surrounded by the law and that their biggest secret was exposed, immediately turned their focus on escaping, melting away into the docks, their mission a failure. Detective Cy Norton, however, was caught. Damon stepped out of the shadows, his expression cold and focused. "You're done, Cy," Damon said, looking at the disgraced detective. "Serena has the truth, and I have the proof. You tried to bury a massacre for 12 years, and you just started a war on a promise." Cy Norton was overwhelmed and disarmed by the incoming honest officers. The exposure of his historical corruption and his current murderous pursuit of Serena would shake the entire city's political structure, leading to mass arrests and the collapse of the dirty cops network. The city's power structure was shaken to its core. In the aftermath, Damon Vance, though a criminal, was hailed as the man who stopped a terrorist attack by a powerful foreign organization, the Moettis, and exposed the corruption of one of the city's highest-ranking police officers, Cy Norton. He became a complex hero, redeemed by his vow. Weeks later, the dust settled. Damon wasn't arrested, but his empire was now publicly scrutinized. He had exposed corruption, but he was still the boss. Serena was finally safe. She was sitting in a sunny, quiet new apartment that Damon had set up for her in Montreal, far from the war zone. She had started auditing the recovered money from the internal traitors, using her photographic memory to track the funds and rebuild her life. She was no longer a waitress, she was the survivor who brought down a conspiracy. Damon stood in the doorway, wearing a simple leather jacket, not a suit. "I found it," Damon said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "The farm. The place Aunt Lena talked about. It's a small property near the coast, under a hidden trust. It belongs to you, Serena." He had kept his promise to Sophia Pryor, not just by protecting her daughter, but by restoring her legacy. Serena walked up to him, the fear completely gone from her eyes, replaced by strength and affection. She looked at the man who was once a monster, then a guardian, and finally, a man redeemed by love and duty. "You risked everything for me, Damon," she said softly. Damon looked at her, his hazel eyes finally clear of guilt. "I kept my promise, Serena. I saved the promised daughter." He hadn't been able to save Keisha, but by risking his life for Serena, he had saved himself. He had found redemption, not in avoiding crime, but in choosing the right kind of fight. Serena reached out and touched his hand, the hand that had held a gun and held her in the alley.